be presenting on Chapter 2, Perception, Self and Communication under the topic of Error in Perception. So what are the errors we made in perceptions? So firstly, it is prejudice. Prejudice is an assumption or an opinion that we made about someone simply based on the person's membership in a particular group. So first thing first, before I start getting into the details of what prejudice is and the example, the movie that we studied for this particular presentation is Mulan 2019, and it takes place in the days of the imperial dynasty, where it is to be said that every daughter in the family needs to be matched with a male and prove they are worthy by marrying them, and they have to act nicely, ladylike, dress nicely, talk politely, no big laughs, learn how to cook, and many more. So to relate it to the movie, in one scene, the mother was complaining to the husband about how Mulan does not fit in the society of a woman, a lady, and she is behaving like a man instead. She was worried that she wouldn't be able to find herself a husband, and in another scene from the movie, the matchmaker described what a good wife is, and that is the prejudice faced by women back in the days.
Quiet, composed, graceful, elegant, poised, polite. These are the qualities we see in a good wife. These are the qualities we see in Mulan.
Secondly is stereotyping and prejudice. Stereotype is a fixed general image or a set characteristic that a lot of people believe represent a particular type of person or thing. It is also a term to define all people of certain belief into a mostly negative category that may only reflect a selected few of the racial demographic. The quality or condition of judging someone before you meet them is usually by using stereotypes. So in the movie, it is clear to see that only the male are allowed to go fight in a war, as they are portrayed to be the strong and powerful ones. And when Mulan reveals to them that she is indeed a woman, the leader asks Mulan to leave the battlefield and not to show her face near the battlefield anymore, or else she'll be executed. And here's a snippet from the movie to prove it.
Betrayed the regiment. You've brought disgrace to the Hua family.
Commander.
Your deceit is my shame. Commander, what is the punishment assigned to this imposter? Expulsion.
I would rather be executed.
From this moment forward, you are expelled from the Emperor's Imperial Army.
Next is first impression. First impression is the initial opinion about a person upon first time of meeting them. It involves negative or positive evaluation of a person's character. For instance, when Hong Hui and Hua Jun, Mulan, first met, they had an extremely poor first impression of each other, because they were both pointing their sword on each other's neck.
Need a hand, little man?
Insult me again and you'll taste the tip of my blade.
Lower your sword.
Or what?
And lastly, self-serving bias. A self-serving bias is the common habit of a person taking credit for positive events or outcome, but blaming outside factors for the negative events. To relate it to the movie, Mulan's mom favored her second daughter more, as she is more ladylike than her sister Hua Mulan. Mulan not having a ladylike attitude brings embarrassment to the family, to the mother especially. So here is a snippet from the movie to prove the point.
I ask you, what man would want to marry a girl who sits around rooftops chasing chickens? She gives me no trouble. The matchmaker will find a good husband for her. It is Mulan I worry about. They'll call her a witch. It's time you talk to her.
I would like to end this presentation by relating this topic to my own personal experience, which is having to deal with the stereotype of living as a girl. So whenever we have a big family gathering at my grandparents' house, mostly the cooking and the cleaning are mostly done by the aunties and the nieces, which are the girls of the family. So even after we're tired of doing the cooking and cleaning, after we're done eating, they would still say something like, "Ha, anak dara, lepas makan tolong kemas ya," which basically means that after you're done with eating, please help with the dishes, especially the girls. The girls, please help with the cleaning. So it's basically in that household, only the girls are helping with the house chores. So I would say that this is a living proof that this kind of stereotype still exists, and we as the younger generation should totally stop practicing this, so we would have like a better future for the younger generations. And yes, that's it from me. Thank you for listening.
So today I'm going to discuss about difference in perceptions. There are 4 difference in perceptions. The first one is psychological factor, which means people differ from each other in height, weight, gender, race, ethnicity, body type, and senses. In the movie Mulan, her name is Hua Mulan, her gender is a girl, and her race is Chinese. The second is past experiences and roles. So your past experiences lead you to see the world differently. The role you play in various social contexts. When Mulan was a kid, she was chasing after the chicken to put it back in the coop. As she acts like a boy when she was chasing the chicken, as she was climbing and running around the neighborhood building. The neighbors are bad talking her as she does not act like a girl supposed to act as in a polite manner. Her father asks her to behave and acts like a girl supposed to be. When she was grown into a woman, she believed that she have to just behave in a polite manner and going to the matchmaker to get married as to bring honor to her family. In order of that, she have to conceal her true self. This have made Mulan think that men are more superior than women. The third one is present feelings. So present feelings is about current emotions, health, personal events can affect the perceptions. So in the movie, after Mulan have encountered with the witch, her perception have changed. She was willing to tell the military the truth that she was a girl and accept any of the consequences as she has breached the pledge of the military. She has become more certain to be true to herself rather than hiding herself. The last difference in perception is culture. So culture is about shared beliefs, values, customs, behaviors that the members of a society use to grasp the world. So in the matchmaker in Mulan, how the ancient Chinese got married. In feudal China, marriage was arranged by one's parents instead of one's own will. Being a matchmaker was a decent female occupation and it played a key part in families' marriage issues. A matchmaker's responsibilities were to find good matches between couples and to chart out auspicious dates for wedding ceremonies. The family background, wealth, zodiac sign, and dates of birth were necessary elements taken into consideration for an auspicious match. When the boy's parents identify a possible bride-to-be, they would send a matchmaker to her parents to deliver the intention and get her parents' approval, as well the date and time that she was born. The groom's family would place a note with the girl's birth details on ancestral altar for 3 days. If nothing bad happened, such as quarrels between the families or a loss of property, the parents would take this as a sign that the marriage was favored by their ancestors and would give the boy's birth details to the matchmaker to present to the girl's family so that they could go through the same process. And the second culture is in Mulan is the definition of a qualified wife in feudal China. Quiet, composed, graceful, disciplined. These are the qualities we see in a good wife. These are the qualities we see in Mulan. This is said by the matchmaker in the official teaser of Mulan released by Disney. So in feudal China, females had to live up to the society's moral standards. A girl should obey her father, a wife should obey her husband, and a widow should focus on raising her children. The definition of a nice lady was to have a good virtue, have courteous manners when speaking, be graceful in appearance, and be good at managing household affairs. These were the qualities men sought in a good wife to be in feudal China.
Hi and welcome. My name is Julia and I'll be presenting in regards of Chapter 6, Stages of Interpersonal Relationships. Now, Pearson and Associates stated that communication and relationship development are symbiotic. Following that, the video explained that relationships start, grow, and sometimes end through communication. Explained further that one of the most obvious characteristics of relationship is that they occur in stages, moving from initial contact to greater intimacy and sometimes to solution. Now, following this chapter, relationship will undergo the DMD. It may sound like a quirky acronym made by young people, but for easier understanding, stages in interpersonal relationship covers D, developing, M, maintaining, and D, deterioration. Some relationship may go through all of the stages or mix, or maybe just two of them. For this subject, we'll be analyzing the stages of relationship in Pride and Prejudice. A brief explanation of the movie, Pride and Prejudice 2005, is an adaptation of the book written by Jane Austen in the 1813s. Now, it's all about the Bennet girls and the different choices and life they decide. The main focus of this Bennet girl is Elizabeth. Now, let's begin the discussion with the first stage, which is developing. Within this stage is where couple progress from meeting to meeting, from strangers to lovers. Elizabeth and Darcy first met and laid eyes on each other at the assembly hall of the public ball, and although they didn't first met, it was brief. And Elizabeth, hearing remarks from Darcy, does not help her having a good impression of him. Perhaps in the beginning of Elizabeth and Darcy's development of relationship begins when Elizabeth visits Bingley's estate to take care of her sudden-stricken sister, Jane. It was at this point Elizabeth met more people and also began to get to know Darcy. This is what the video addressed as a turning point. It is a movement through the various stages takes place both gradually and in leaps. Turning point can be both positive and also negative, but for Darcy and Elizabeth, it was mixed. Within developing relationship 2, Pearson and Associate mentioned that the couple may have a common language that allows them to communicate with each other without stranger understanding. They share each other's friends and perhaps eliminate other relationships. In this matter, due to the relationship of Jane and Bingley, Jane being Elizabeth's sister and Bingley being Mr. Darcy's best mate, was the connection that Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy had with each other. Moving on to the next point is maintaining relationship. Now, Pearson and Associate described this stage as when the couple bonded, they engaged in a process of maintaining or keeping their relationship together. Darcy and Elizabeth's relationship have been developing, but not to the point of maintaining it. However, just like maintaining relationship, the curves of Darcy's and Elizabeth's relationship is just as curvy as the mountain peaks. Now, there are also dialectic relationship theory, which will be discussed in the next slide. Lastly, we've come across deterioration. Relational deterioration, as stated by Pearson and Associates, occurs because of the pressures of external events, due to the differences that develops within the couple, or because of the relationship with other people. Again, as mentioned, not all relationships will get to go through all stages and might even skip one. This is where Pearson holds a communication skill as a key importance for the DMD stage in interpersonal relationship. The level of communication, the amount of communication, and the content can be a determiner of whether the relationship is a success or a failure. The movie has a lot of ups and downs when it comes to relationship. Elizabeth and Darcy, Jane and Bingley, both relationships almost come to deterioration. But at the end of the movie, the relationship or love prevails and happy ending ensues. At face value, there are no deterioration, only a happy ending. Now, Pearson did explain that dialectic refers to the tension that exists between the two conflict or interacting forces, element, or ideas. Now, the dialectic or separation suggests that the tension between wanting to be separate entities and wanting to integrate with another. The stability and changes suggest that tension within wanting event, conversation, or behaviors to be the same or desiring change. Dialectic expression or privacy suggests that tension between wanting to self-disclose and be completely open and wanting to be private and close. An important thing to consider within the dialectic theory is also the contradiction. Now, two people can have the same interest, be engaging, but again, not the same people with same thing in mind. Two people have two opposing desires for maintaining the relationship, like according to Pearson and Associates. Now, what about the dialectic relationship theory and the relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy? Ups and downs between Pride and Prejudice, the constant interference and internal struggle within the character shows two opposites that just can't possibly be together. But the movie shows, and still within the context of maintaining a relationship, is the character development. The struggle of Mr. Darcy putting down his ego and arrogance of being involved with a woman of a lower status than him, to accept that there are things beyond his control, both his feeling, the circumstances of both families, and most importantly, his pride. Again mentioned, it's normal to have tension within a relationship, but before calling it quits, one must try to maintain it, and Mr. Darcy did just that. He managed to overcome his dialectics and redeem himself later on the movie. Now, within my experience, my personal relationship, there has been a lot of deteriorating relationship, but there's also been a lot of maintaining relationships that I have. From this and from what I understand from my experience is that the most important thing when it comes to relationship or a good relationship is to communicate. Just like Pearson and Associate were telling us, communication is the key importance for a good relationship. Well, when it comes to communication, it's not just any kind of communication, it's got to be the right kind of communication, the right way, and also the right timing. Because sometimes you only got one chance in life. That's all for me.
Assalamualaikum and greetings to Miss D. I am Nurul Adawiyah and I will be explaining about the essential interpersonal communication behaviors. Firstly, what is interpersonal communication? Interpersonal communication can be used in many different situations and contexts, whether at work or home. We use these vital skills to create context, make friends, and maintain relationships. It also expresses our personal needs and understand the needs of others. Next, I will be explaining the interpersonal communication behaviors based on the movie I've watched, which is Pride and Prejudice. Firstly, verbal. In other words, verbal is speaking. This term covers the words you use, how persuasively you speak, the language you use, which words you emphasize, and even the use of affirmative sounds and short phrases like "yup" or "uh-huh." For example, from the movie, Mr. Darcy, who asked Elizabeth Bennet to have the next dance with him at the ball Mr. Bingley hosts. Mr. Darcy confronts her and straight out asking for a dance, and Elizabeth Bennet agreed to dance with him while nodding her head. Next is listening. Listening skills is possibly the most important of all communication skills aside from verbal skills. You can make a good guess for listening as the most important interpersonal communication skills. Listening also includes special techniques like reflection and clarification. The best listeners are people who can focus their attention on the speaker to make the latter feel like they are the sole and most important person in the room. Examples from the movie is when Mr. Darcy confessed his feelings and proposed to Elizabeth Bennet for the second time. Elizabeth Bennet listens to Mr. Darcy's confession with empathy instead of cutting his words off from the first time Mr. Darcy confessed his feelings. Mr. Darcy promised that this will be the last time he confronted Elizabeth Bennet, and he wanted her to listen on what he had been feeling for her this whole time. Next, on interpersonal communication behaviors is context. Sometimes we can't control what people hear our message, where they are, their mood and mindset, and their level of comprehension. But again, this harkens to the section dealing with interpersonal communication elements, specifically the context. Have you ever heard the phrase "read the room"? That means the speaker should be paying attention to the general mood and atmosphere of the listeners and where they are. Context includes physical location, the mood or emotional climate of the audience, and social context. For example, from the movie is when Mr. Darcy confessed to Elizabeth Bennet for the first time. There, he didn't even read the room. He didn't even bother to look at Lizzie's expression, that is furious, frustrated, and disappointed because of what she had heard in the church about Mr. Darcy's attitude towards her sister Jane behind them. And the location where Mr. Darcy confessed is just out of place. In the middle of the pouring rain, he just straight out saying, "I love you" to Elizabeth Bennet. Lastly is a non-verbal. This phylum type covers body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and gestures. Again, it's essential that the listener picks up and correctly interprets non-verbal cues. For example, in the movie Pride and Prejudice, where Elizabeth Bennet is worried sick about her sister that stays at Mr. Bingley's mansion, and she ended up going there. There, she meets Mr. Darcy again, and as a sign of formality in the old times, she had to lift up her skirt a little and bow to Mr. Darcy. Mr. Darcy also bowed his head towards Elizabeth Bennet to show he also respects her. Fast forward, when it was time for Elizabeth Bennet to head back home, Mr. Darcy holds her hand with a sign of affection and a gaze of love for Elizabeth Bennet when she steps into the carriage. Before I end my part, I would like to share about my personal experience regarding this topic. I would like to pick context, which is from my understanding, it would mean as common sense. Common sense is very important in our life because without common sense, we will be seen as slow or even terrible. For example, there are times where I wanted to confess just like Mr. Darcy did to Elizabeth Bennet, but then I does not have the courage to confess because I would be thinking like, why am I making people comfortable with my feelings? Why do I want to wreck this great relationship by confessing my romantic feelings towards someone? At last, I didn't even bother to check on my feelings, and luckily, from time to time, the feelings just fade. Now I just stand with, if it's meant to be, it will be. Thank you, that's all from me.